Commander Yith-Sera stood at the observation window of her ship, the Eternal Light, and watched the stars drift by like scattered diamonds. For 60 years, she had led the Valanthi exploration fleet through the dark spaces between worlds. For 60 years, she had searched for new life, new civilizations, new friends to welcome into the galactic concord. The Valanthi were a peaceful species. They had soft blue scales that shimmered in the light. Their eyes were large and gentle, made for seeing beauty in all things. They had no claws, no fangs, no natural weapons. Evolution had made them kind, and kindness had helped them survive. Now their sensors had found something wonderful. "Commander," said her science officer, a young male named Kethan. His scales were pale green, and his voice shook with excitement. "We have confirmed the readings. There are artificial structures on the fourth planet. Cities, factories, ships in orbit." Yith-Sera felt warmth spread through her chest. A new species. After all these years of searching through empty systems and dead rocks, they had found intelligent life. "Show me," she said. The main screen flickered to life. The planet appeared before them, and Yith-Sera heard several of her crew gasp in surprise. The world was beautiful. Blue oceans covered half its surface. Green forests spread across the continents. White clouds drifted through a clear atmosphere. But this was wrong. Yith-Sera remembered this system from the old surveys. 300 years ago, Valanthi scouts had passed through here. They had recorded this planet as a dead world. No water, no air. Just rust-colored dust and ancient craters. "How is this possible?" asked Lieutenant Vorn, her security chief. He was older than the others. His scales faded to a dark gray. He had seen many strange things in his long life, but even he looked confused. Kethan's fingers moved quickly over his instruments. "They changed it, Commander. Whoever lives there, they transformed the entire planet. They added an atmosphere. They created oceans. They planted forests." He paused, and his voice dropped to a whisper. "They turned a dead world into a living one." Yith-Sera stared at the screen. She had heard of terraforming before. Some species could do small things to make planets more comfortable. But this was something else entirely. This was not a small change. This was creation on a scale she had never imagined. What kind of species could reshape an entire world? "Take us closer," she ordered, slowly. "Use all peaceful protocols. I want them to know we come as friends." The fleet moved forward. There were 12 ships in total, all of them built for exploration and science. They carried no weapons. The Valanthi had never needed weapons. The galaxy had always been kind to them. As they approached the planet, Yith-Sera ordered her communications officer to send greetings. They transmitted in every way they knew. Mathematical patterns, light pulses, radio waves, simple messages of peace and friendship. The planet did not answer. Hours passed. The fleet entered orbit. Below them, the cities spread across the land like silver webs. The buildings were tall and sharp, reaching toward the sky like fingers. Roads connected everything in straight lines. Factories stood silent beside rivers. Farms stretched for hundreds of miles, their crops brown and dead. "Why do they not respond?" Yith-Sera asked. No one had an answer. She ordered probes to scan the surface. The results came back quickly, and each one made her hearts beat faster with worry. The atmosphere processors were still running, but barely. The power plants were failing. The ships in orbit drifted without control, their engines cold and dark, and everywhere they looked, they found the same terrible thing. Nothing moved. No vehicles on the roads, no people in the streets, no animals in the forests. The entire planet was still, like a photograph of a world that had once been alive. "Commander," Kethan said, and his voice was barely a whisper now. "I am scanning for life signs." He paused. His scales had turned almost white with fear. "There are none. The colony is dead." Yith-Sera felt cold. She had found many empty worlds before. Dead planets were common in the galaxy. But those worlds had never been alive. They were just rocks and dust, places where life had never taken hold. This was different. This world had been full of people. Millions of them, maybe more. They had built cities and farms and factories. They had children and dreams and futures. And now they were gone. "How?" she asked. "What happened to them?" Kethan shook his head. "I cannot tell from here. There are no signs of natural disaster, no asteroid impacts, no volcanic activity, No radiation storms. He looked up at her, and she saw her own fear reflected in his eyes. Whatever killed them, it was not nature. Lieutenant Vorn stepped forward. His hand moved to his belt, where he carried a small tool that could be used as a weapon if needed. "Commander, we should leave. This place is dangerous. Something terrible happened here, and we do not know what it was." Ythsera understood his fear. Part of her wanted to run, to take the fleet back to safe space and forget they had ever found this place. But she was an explorer. She had dedicated her life to understanding the universe, even the parts that frightened her. And there was something else, something that pulled at her heart. These people, whoever they had been, deserved to be remembered. They had built something wonderful here. They had turned death into life, and then something had destroyed them. Someone needed to know their story. Someone needed to understand what had happened. "No," she said. "We will stay. We will go down to the surface and learn the truth." She turned to face her crew. These people were like us. They dreamed of a better future. They worked to build it. I will not leave them forgotten in the dark. The crew was silent. She could see their fear, but she could also see their trust. They believed in her. They would follow her, even into the unknown. "Prepare a landing team," Ythsera ordered. "I will lead it myself." Vorn opened his mouth to argue, but she raised her hand to stop him. "I know the risks, old friend, but this is why we are here. This is why we travel between the stars, not just to find new friends, but to understand the universe in all its beauty and all its horror." She looked back at the screen, at the silent cities below. "Whatever happened here, we must know. The Concord must know. The galaxy must know." She did not say what she was really thinking. She did not say the words that echoed in her mind like a warning. If something could kill an entire world of people, it might still be out there. And if the Volanthi did not learn what it was, they might be next. The shuttle bay doors opened, and Commander Ythsera led her team into the darkness. Above them, the dead planet waited, and in the silence of those empty cities, secrets waited too. Terrible secrets that would change everything the Volanthi believed about the universe. They had come looking for friends. They would find something else entirely. The shuttle descended through the clouds, and Commander Ythsera watched the dead world grow larger through the window. From space, the cities had looked almost peaceful, like toys arranged on a table, like models of places where people might live. Up close, they were something else entirely. The buildings rose higher than any the Volanthi had ever built. They stretched toward the sky like mountains of metal and glass. Sharp angles cut through the air. Straight lines ran in every direction. There was no softness here, no curves, no gentle shapes. Everything looked hard. Everything looked built to last forever. The shuttle landed in an open area between several large buildings. Dust swirled around them as the engines powered down. Ythsera checked her breathing mask and made sure her protective suit was sealed. The atmosphere outside was breathable, but she did not trust it. Something had killed everyone on this planet. She would not take chances. "Stay close," she said to her team. "Move slowly. Touch nothing, unless you must." They stepped out of the shuttle and into the silence. Ythsera had visited many worlds. She had walked through ancient forests and climbed frozen mountains. She had explored caves deep beneath alien oceans, but she had never felt anything like this. The silence here was heavy. It pressed against her like a physical weight. It was the silence of a place where noise had once lived and now was gone forever. They walked down a wide street. Buildings rose on either side like walls of a canyon. Windows stared at them like empty eyes. Vehicles sat abandoned on the road, their doors hanging open, their seats empty. Papers and trash blew across the ground in the wind. "The people left in a hurry," said Kethan. He knelt beside one of the vehicles and examined it with his scanner. This was not planned. They were running from something, or running toward something, said Vorn. His eyes moved constantly, searching for threats. Maybe they tried to escape. Maybe they gathered somewhere safe. They found the first body in what looked like a medical building. The sign outside showed symbols they did not recognize, but the equipment inside made the purpose clear. This was a place of healing. A hospital. The body lay on a bed in a small room. Ythsera approached it slowly, her heart's pounding in her chest. She had seen dead creatures before. Death was part of life, and she had learned to accept it long ago. But this was different. This was a person, a thinking, feeling being who had once lived and dreamed and loved. The creature was strange. It had 2 arms, 2 legs, and stood upright like the Valanthi. But that was where the similarities ended. Its skin was soft and pale, without scales or shells or any protection. Its body looked fragile, like it could be broken easily. Its face had 2 small eyes, a nose, and a mouth with white teeth. "Begin scanning," Ythsera said softly. Kethan moved forward with his instruments. He worked in silence for several minutes, his face growing more confused with each reading. Finally, he stepped back and shook his head. "Commander, I do not understand what I am seeing. Explain. This creature should not exist." Kethan brought up a display of his findings. "Its biology is impossible. Its bones are dense and heavy, built for a world with gravity much stronger than this one. Its muscles are thick and powerful, far beyond what a peaceful species would need." He pointed to different parts of the scan as he spoke. "The blood carries iron. Iron, Commander, the same metal we use to build machines, and the cells are designed to heal quickly. Wounds that would kill a Valanthi would barely slow this creature down." Ythsera stared at the display. "What about their homeworld? What kind of planet creates life like this?" Kethan's scales faded to white again. "A death world, Commander. The data suggests they evolved on a planet with extreme conditions. High gravity that makes every step a struggle. Wide temperature changes from burning heat to freezing cold. Radiation from their star that damages cells constantly. And their atmosphere." He paused. "Their atmosphere contains free oxygen." The other team members gasped. Oxygen was a dangerous gas. It caused fires. It corroded metal. It destroyed organic tissue. Breathing it was like breathing slow poison. "They breathe oxygen?" Vorn asked. "By choice. They require it to survive," Kethan said. "Their bodies burn it for energy. They are, in a very real sense, creatures of fire. They survive by carrying controlled combustion inside their own cells." Ythsera looked at the pale body on the bed. It looked so weak, so fragile. But now she understood that this was a lie. This soft exterior hid something powerful, something that had evolved to survive conditions that would kill any Valanthi in moments. "They built all of this," she said quietly. "They came from a death world, and instead of dying, they learned to reshape other worlds. They took a dead planet and made it live." "Yes, Commander. What kind of willpower does that require? What kind of determination?" No one answered. The question hung in the air like smoke. They continued through the hospital. More bodies. More of the strange, soft creatures with their hidden strength. Some had died in their beds. Others had died trying to help the sick. Doctors and nurses who had worked until the end. In one room, they found something that made Ythsera stop. 2 of the creatures lay together on a narrow bed. One was large, the other small. An adult and a child. The adult's arms were wrapped around the child, holding it close, protecting it. Even in death, the adult had tried to keep the child safe. Ythsera felt tears form in her eyes. These were not monsters. They were people. They loved their children. They cared for their sick. They built hospitals and homes and cities where families could live, and something had killed them all. "We need to find out what happened here," she said. Her voice was hard now, filled with purpose. "There must be records, information, a central computer or database. The main government building is nearby," said one of her technicians, a young female named Tress. "I detected power signatures coming from that direction. Weak, but present. Then that is where we go." They left the hospital and walked deeper into the city. The streets were filled with more bodies now. People who had collapsed while trying to run. People who had fallen and never risen again. All of them had the same look on their faces. Pain, fear, and something else. Something that looked like confusion. They had not expected to die. Whatever had killed them had come quickly, without warning. As they walked, Ythsera thought about what she had learned. These creatures were survivors. They had evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day. And they had won. They had left their poisonous planet and spread to the stars. They had bent the universe to their will. But something had stopped them. Something had killed an entire colony of these impossible survivors. What could do that? What could be strong enough to destroy creatures who breathed fire and walked on death worlds? The answer waited ahead, and Commander Ythsera was about to learn that the thing she should fear most was not what had killed these people. It was who. The government building stood at the center of the city like a giant made of stone and metal. It was taller than everything around it. and wider too. Steps led up to massive doors that hung open, as if inviting visitors inside. But there were no visitors anymore. Only the dead and the wind. Commander Ythsera led her team up the steps and through the doors. Inside, the building was dark. Emergency lights glowed red along the floors, casting strange shadows on the walls. The air was cold and stale. It smelled like dust and something else, something bitter and sad. They found the main computer room on the 3rd floor. Banks of machines lined the walls, their screens dark and silent. Cables ran across the floor like sleeping snakes. In the center of the room stood a large console with a single chair in front of it. "Can you access their systems?" Ythsera asked. Tress moved to the console and began working. Her fingers moved carefully over the strange buttons and switches. "The power is low, but the data storage is intact. Give me time, Commander. I can make it work." They waited. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, the screens flickered to life, filling the room with pale blue light. Symbols appeared on the displays, words in a language none of them had ever seen. "I will need to decode their language," Tress said. This could take days, maybe weeks, but the machines had other ideas. As Tress worked, a program activated on its own. The screens changed, and suddenly they could read the words. The translation was rough, but clear enough to understand. "They built automatic translators," Kethan said with wonder in his voice. "They expected to meet other species. They wanted to communicate." Ythsera stared at the screens. These people had prepared for first contact. They had wanted to meet others like her, others from distant stars. They had built tools to help them speak and understand. And now they were all dead. "Show me their history," Ythsera said. "I want to know who they were." The machines obeyed. Files opened. Videos played. Documents scrolled across the screens. And slowly, piece by piece, the story of humanity revealed itself. They called themselves humans. They came from a planet named Earth, a world that matched everything Kethan had guessed. High gravity, extreme temperatures, poisonous atmosphere, dangerous wildlife. Their planet tried to kill them every day, and every day they found new ways to survive. But survival was not enough for them. They wanted more. They wanted to grow, to spread, to conquer. The archives showed their history, and it was written in blood. War after war after war. Humans fighting humans for land, for resources, for ideas. They developed weapons that could destroy cities in seconds. They built bombs that could poison entire continents. They created diseases in laboratories and released them on their enemies. They did this to themselves, Vorn whispered. His scales had turned dark with horror. Their own species, their own people. Ythsera could not speak. She watched videos of explosions that turned mountains to dust. She read reports of battles that killed millions. She saw images of children starving while soldiers marched past them toward the next fight. The Valanthi had never known war. Not real war. They had disagreements, arguments, sometimes even fights. But nothing like this. Nothing that consumed entire generations in fire and pain. How did they survive? Kethan asked. How did any of them live through this? The answer came in the next set of files. Despite everything, humans had found a way. They always found a way. They built ships that could travel between stars. They spread to other worlds, other systems. They took their wars with them. But they also took their dreams. Some humans wanted peace. Some wanted to escape the violence and start fresh. They gathered together, built colony ships, and flew away from Earth to find new homes where they could live without fighting. This colony, called Kepler's Hope, was one of those places. The archives showed the early days. Ships arriving, families stepping onto new ground, children playing in fields that had once been empty dust, people working together to build the machines that would transform their world. It had taken 50 years, but they had done it. They had turned a dead planet into a garden. For a while, there was happiness. For a while, there was hope. But humanity could never escape itself. The war found them. Not the old wars of Earth, but a new war. A bigger war. Humans had spread across dozens of star systems, and they had brought their oldest habits with them. Factions formed, alliances broke, and soon, the fires of conflict burned between the stars themselves. Kepler's Hope tried to stay neutral. They did not want to fight. They had left everything behind to find peace. But in a galaxy at war, peace was not always a choice. The files showed messages from the colonial government, pleas for help, warnings about approaching ships, desperate attempts to contact anyone who might listen, and then, one final file, a video recorded by the colony's leader, a woman named Sarah Chen. She looked tired. Her eyes were red from crying. Behind her, alarms were ringing. This is Governor Sarah Chen of Kepler's Hope. If anyone receives this message, please remember us. Please remember what we tried to build here. She paused, and Yith Sarah saw fear on her face, but also something else. Pride, determination. Even at the end, this human refused to give up. A ship has entered our system. They call themselves peacekeepers, but we know what they really are. We know why they have come. We refuse to join their war. We refuse to build weapons. We refuse to send our children to die for someone else's ambitions. Her voice broke. And now they will punish us for our choice. The recording ended. Yith Sarah stood frozen. Around her, her team was silent. They had all heard the same words. They had all understood the same terrible truth. Kepler's Hope had not been destroyed by disaster. It had not been killed by accident. It had been murdered by other humans. Peacekeepers, Vorn said. The word sounded like a curse in his mouth. They called themselves peacekeepers while they killed millions. Yith Sarah thought about the bodies they had found. The doctors in the hospital. The parent holding the child. All those people who had only wanted to live in peace. Find the rest of the records, she ordered. Her voice was cold now, hard as stone. I want to know everything. I want to know exactly what these peacekeepers did. I want to know how they killed an entire world. Tress turned back to the console. Her hands were shaking, but she worked anyway. The screens filled with new information. Medical reports. Sensor logs. Final messages from dying people. And as Yith Sarah read, she felt her hope turn to horror, because what the peacekeepers had done was worse than anything she could have imagined. 12 soldiers had come to this world. 12 soldiers had killed everyone on it, and they had done it without firing a single shot. The records told the story in perfect detail. Every moment was captured. Every death was documented. And as Commander Yith Sarah read through the files, she felt something inside her break. The peacekeeper ship had arrived on a warm summer day. The people of Kepler's Hope saw it enter orbit and sent greetings. They were hopeful. Maybe these visitors came in peace. Maybe the war had ended. Maybe they could finally stop being afraid. The ship did not respond to their messages. Instead, it released a small shuttle that landed near the capital city. 12 figures stepped out. They wore white suits that covered their entire bodies. Their faces were hidden behind masks. They carried no visible weapons. The colonial guards approached them carefully. They asked questions. Who are you? Why are you here? What do you want? The 12 said nothing. They simply walked into the city. The guards tried to stop them. That was when the 12 showed their first secret. They were fast, faster than normal humans. Their suits were not just for protection. They were machines that made them stronger, quicker, almost impossible to fight. They disabled the guards without killing them. They did not need to kill. Not with weapons. They had brought something much worse. One of the 12 carried a small case. Inside was a glass container filled with clear liquid. It looked like water. It was not water. They opened the container in the middle of the city's main square. The liquid turned to mist and drifted away on the wind. Within an hour, it had spread across the entire colony. The first symptoms appeared the next morning. Yith Sarah read the medical reports with growing horror. The humans had created a disease, not a natural sickness, but something built in a laboratory. Something designed with terrible precision. It started with a fever. Then came the coughing. Then the bleeding. The human body turned against itself, attacking its own organs, destroying itself from the inside. The doctors worked without rest. They tried everything they knew. But this disease had been made to defeat them. Every medicine they used, it adapted. Every treatment they tried, it survived. It was not alive in the normal sense. It was more like a machine, a weapon that wore the shape of a sickness. Children died first. Their bodies were smaller, weaker, less able to fight. Parents held them and watched them fade away. Then the elderly followed. Then everyone else. The archives showed videos that Yith Sarah wished she had never seen. Hospital rooms filled with the dying. Streets where people collapsed and never rose. Families gathered together, holding hands, waiting for the end. And through it all, the 12 peacekeepers watched. They stayed in the city for the entire 13 days. They walked among the sick and did nothing to help. They recorded everything with their cameras. They took notes and samples. They studied the dying like scientists studying insects. The colonial government begged them for help. They begged them to share a cure, medicine, anything. The peacekeepers had built this disease. Surely they could stop it. The 12 refused. They said nothing. They just watched and waited. On the 7th day, Governor Sarah Chen confronted them in person. She was already sick. The fever made her shake. Blood ran from her nose. But she walked to where they stood and demanded answers. Why? She asked. We never hurt anyone. We just wanted to live. Why are you doing this? One of the 12 finally spoke. His voice came through his mask, flat and empty of feeling. You refuse to serve. The unity requires all humans to contribute to the war effort. You chose to remain neutral. Neutrality is not permitted. Your example would encourage others to refuse their duty. Sarah Chen stared at him. So you kill us? 2 million people? Children? Because we would not build your bombs? This world has strategic value. Its resources will be harvested. New colonists will be brought. People who understand their duty. The peacekeeper's voice never changed. You are not being punished, Governor. You are being replaced. Sarah Chen died 3 days later. Her last recording showed her lying in a bed, too weak to stand. She spoke directly to the camera, to anyone who might find it someday. If you are watching this, then you have found what is left of us. We were 2.3 million people. We had dreams. We had families. We had futures. And now we have nothing. Because we would not kill for someone else's cause. She coughed, and blood stained her lips. Remember us. Remember that we chose peace, even when peace meant death. And if you ever meet humanity, if you ever see our ships in your skies, run. Run as far and as fast as you can. Because we are not all monsters, but enough of us are. And you cannot tell the difference until it is too late. The recording ended. Yith Sarah stood in silence. Around her, her team wept. Even Vorn, the old soldier who had seen so much, had tears running down his scales. 2 million people, Kethan whispered. Killed by 12. With a disease in a bottle. Not just killed, Yith Sarah said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. Hollow. Empty. Erased. Replaced. Like they never mattered at all. She thought about the bodies they had found. The parent and child in the hospital. The doctors who had worked until the end. The people who had died in the streets, reaching toward help that never came. They had been alive. They had been real. They had loved and dreamed and hoped. And 12 soldiers had ended all of it, without ever raising a weapon. Commander, Tress said quietly. There is more. Yith Sarah closed her eyes. She did not want more. She had seen enough horror to last 1,000 lifetimes. But she was a commander. She had a duty to know. Show me. The screens changed. New files appeared. Reports from after the colony died. The 12 peacekeepers had left when the last human stopped breathing. They returned to their ship and sent a message to their commanders. The message was brief and terrible in its simplicity. Kepler's hope neutralized. Population eliminated. No survivors. Contamination will clear within 30 days. Planet ready for recolonization. Glory to Earth. Glory to the unity. That was all. 13 days of death. 2,300,000 lives ended. And they reduced it to a few sentences. A report. A box checked on a list. But that was not what made Yith Sarah's blood freeze. That was not what turned her hope into pure terror. It was the final file. A report from the peacekeeper ship's navigation computer. They had been here. And then they had left. To do the same thing somewhere else. The computer showed their next destination. Another colony. Another world full of humans who had refused to fight. And then another. And another. And another. The 12 had not stopped with Kepler's hope. They had continued their mission across the stars. World after world. Colony after colony. Millions dead. Then billions. They were still out there somewhere. And they were very, very good at their job. Commander Yith Sarah ordered her team back to the shuttle. No one argued. No one asked questions. They had all seen enough. They had all learned more than they ever wanted to know. The ride back to the fleet was silent. Through the window, Yith Sarah watched the dead cities pass below. All those buildings, all those empty streets, all those dreams turned to dust. 2 million people had lived here once. They had built a paradise from nothing. And now they were gone, wiped away like marks on a board, by 12 soldiers. In 13 days, when she returned to the eternal light, Ythsera went straight to the command room. Her officers were waiting. They had been monitoring her team's findings, and she could see the fear in their faces, the horror, the desperate need to understand. Set a course for home, she said. Maximum speed. We leave immediately. No one questioned her. The fleet turned away from the dead world and began its long journey back to Valanthi space. But Ythsera did not rest. She could not rest. Instead, she sat in her quarters and continued reading the archives they had copied from Kepler's Hope. She needed to know more. She needed to understand what they were dealing with. The files told her about the war that had killed the colony. It had started small, as most wars do. Arguments about resources, disputes about territory, disagreements about who should lead and who should follow. But it had grown. Year after year, it had spread across human space like a fire burning through dry grass. Factions formed, alliances broke, worlds chose sides, and then the killing began. Ythsera read about battles that destroyed entire planets. She read about weapons that could crack moons in half. She read about fleets of thousands of ships fighting until none were left. The numbers were beyond understanding. Billions had died. Billions more would follow. But then, something changed. The war ended, not because the humans had learned to make peace, not because they had grown tired of fighting. The war ended because one side had won. The unity, they called themselves. The faction that had created the peacekeepers. The faction that had killed Kepler's Hope. They had crushed all their enemies. They had conquered every world. They had united humanity under a single government, a single purpose, a single will. For the first time in their history, humans were no longer fighting each other. And now they were looking outward. Ythsera found the files that explained their plans. The Unity believed that humans were destined to rule the galaxy. They believed that all resources, all worlds, all life, belonged to them by right. Other species were either useful or in the way. There was no middle ground. They had already begun to expand. Scout ships were mapping the nearby systems. Colony fleets were preparing to launch, and somewhere in their command centers, generals were making plans for what would happen when they met other intelligent life. The Unity did not want friends. They did not want partners. They wanted subjects. Or they wanted nothing at all. Ythsera thought about her own people. The Valanthi were peaceful. They had no weapons, no armies, no experience with war. They had built their civilization on kindness and cooperation. They believed that the universe was full of potential friends waiting to be found. They had been so wrong. She began writing her report to the Galactic Concord. Her hands shook as she typed, but she forced herself to continue. The Council needed to know. Every species in the Concord needed to know. They needed to understand what was coming. We have made contact with a new species, she wrote. They call themselves humanity. They evolved on a death world and survived conditions that would kill any of us. They are stronger than us, faster than us, more resilient than us. They heal from wounds that would be fatal to a Valanthi. They can survive in environments that would destroy us in moments. She paused, then continued. But their bodies are not what makes them dangerous. Their minds are what we should fear. They are capable of great kindness. The people of Kepler's Hope proved this. They wanted only to live in peace. They built a beautiful world where families could thrive. But they are also capable of great cruelty. Other humans killed them. All of them. 2 million people, including children, erased from existence because they refused to fight in someone else's war. And the killers felt nothing. No guilt, no shame, no remorse. They called it neutralization. They called it duty. Ythsera stood and walked to the window. Outside, the stars drifted past. So many stars. So many worlds. The galaxy had seemed so full of possibility before. Now it seemed full of danger. I recommend no contact, she continued. I recommend immediate preparation for defensive measures. I recommend that every species in the Concord understand what we are facing. Humanity is not evil. That would be easier to understand. Evil can be reasoned with. Evil can sometimes be changed. Humanity is something worse. They are survivors. They come from a world that tried to kill them for millions of years. And they won. They have faced extinction again and again, and they have always found a way to continue. They will not stop. They cannot stop. It is not in their nature. They will expand across the galaxy because that is what they do. They will take what they need because that is how they survived. And if we are in their way, they will remove us. Not because they hate us, not because they want to hurt us, simply because we are there, and they need us not to be. She finished the report and sent it. Then she sat alone in the darkness, thinking about everything she had learned. The Valanthi had always wondered why the galaxy was so quiet. They had found ruins of ancient civilizations on dozens of worlds, great species that had risen and then vanished without explanation. They had thought it was natural. They had thought it was the way of things. Now Ythsera understood. Those species had not vanished naturally. They had met something. Someone. Perhaps not humans exactly. Perhaps other Death World survivors. Other impossible species that had clawed their way to the stars through blood and fire. The galaxy was quiet because the loud ones had been silenced. And now humanity was waking up. Unified. Powerful. Hungry. Ythsera closed her eyes and thought about the parent holding the child in that hospital room. She thought about Governor Sarah Chen, dying but still proud. She thought about all the humans who had only wanted peace. Perhaps not all of them were monsters. Perhaps some were kind, like the Valanthi. Perhaps some would have been friends, but it did not matter. The kind ones had been killed by their own people. The survivors were the strong ones, the hard ones, the ones who could do terrible things and sleep peacefully afterward. Those were the humans who now ruled their species. Those were the humans who were coming. Commander Ythsera opened her eyes and looked at the stars one more time. Run, Sarah Chen had said. Run as far and as fast as you can. Good advice. Ythsera hoped it would be enough. But deep in her hearts, she knew the truth. You could not run from a species that had conquered a death world. You could not hide from creatures who had survived everything their planet could throw at them. Humanity was coming, and when they arrived, the galaxy would learn what the people of Kepler's hope had learned. There was no escape from the survivors. There was only the waiting, and the hope that when the end came, it would at least be quick.